Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Software Development and Architecture Podcast. We have a very special guest with us today. We have Jason Crum. This is podcast number 2 in our series. Jason's a senior enterprise architect for a telecommunications company based in Alaska. Jason, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. We in the last podcast, we were talking about remote work. So, folks, definitely check the first one out before you see this. Before you watch this, I mean, you can certainly watch this without watching that one as well. But to get more context, I highly recommend you just watch them in sequence. In the last one, Jason and I just chatted quite a bit about remote work, the pros, the challenges, and a number of things in that regard. So, I want to pick up from where we left off. And I mentioned in the last podcast, Jason, just before we ended, that I want to, get into the cultural aspects of it, right? So let me take some practical examples. Like when we worked together, the first time we worked together more than once, but the first time it was remote. We didn't know each other, and we connected on the phone, the interview, and then I got started. So if we were in a non-remote setting, there is an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more at a more personal level, right? Maybe have lunches together and so on and so forth. The remote setting does not, unfortunately, allow room for things of that nature. So how should someone, first of all, let me ask the more leading obvious question. And sometimes it's not that leading for engineers. If I said that, hey, if you're doing development work, you're helping a team just, do whatever it is that they need to get done, do we even need to know each other? It's a ridiculous question, but I'm going to ask the question regardless. Differently from non-engineers, like as just engineers working together, if I said that, why should we even know each other? I mean, what would you say for that?
That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that. I've always kind of taken the approach of you should get to know each other if you're going to be working together on a regular basis. I think it's possible, depending upon the personalities, that you could, we don't care. It's all work. But you end up with where the relationship is transactional. You're not actually building a relationship. You're just treating each other as a tool to get something done. I think that's a lot of the problems that I've seen in the past where you have some of the offshoring teams. So your organization decides to offshore some work, and it's a transaction. They are a tool to get something done. They're not part of the team. You're not building relationships. You're not thinking about long term. You're just, here's a task, somebody go get it done. I'm just giving you some money, and whether or not in your work, as long as your work fulfills the contract, great, that's awesome. That works for specific things, but I think if you're trying to make a team that is responsible for delivering of a product of some kind, you have to build a repertoire between those individuals in one way, shape, or form. I don't agree with a lot of the trend of treating people as transactions, and that and relationships and communications as just being that type of I can't think of another word other than transactions, which you see a lot of in social media, especially on Facebook. Oh, I've got a like, and that's the extent of the engagement. Is just hitting like or love or whatever it is. I don't use Facebook, but that is not communication. That's not building a relationship. That's just a transaction.
Unfortunately or fortunately, there's one more thing I cannot disagree with here. But the thing I want to ask Jason is, like, some of us have the personality. Like, I couldn't do any work if I did not know the team. You know what I mean? Yep. It doesn't matter whether it's remote or hybrid or on-site or whatever it is. I would go crazy. I would need to know something. Just a little bit. Just me as a person, right? But what if I know there are great engineers who are not, but they're not there as people. If the company facilitated that, they would do it. But if the company or the team did not go out of the way to make that happen, they would just get whatever they were given the task done. So who is the onus on here? Is it on the individual, or is it on the company or the organization?
I don't want to say that it's entirely on the organization, because once you start to get above, I would say, more than a handful of people in an organization, you do have to recognize that you're going to attract people of different personalities. And so it's just as wrong, in my mind, to force people to do hippie, love kumbaya type of thing, who don't, that's not them. They don't agree with that. They don't want that. Um, so if you force people who are not attracted to that type of culture, or not attracted to that type of interaction, you're doing just as much harm to that individual as if you were going to the other extreme of we're going to treat everybody as transactions. We don't expect any type of collaboration. We don't expect you to be friends in any way, shape, or form. It's just work, pass the task over the wall, and call it good. So you do have to you have to decide where you want to go as a company, but if you want to attract the best talent, sometimes that best talent is going to be a little bit divergent from what it
Right.
is that from how you want to operate personally. You can't go you can't bend to fit everybody, but you do have to allow for some type of accommodations, as well as also just communicate that this is the environment that we work in. If you want to work here, you are going to have to flex a little bit to meet us, and we will try our best to flex and meet you halfway or a quarter of the
Right.
way, whatever.
Okay. Makes sense, right? So let's say you gave. I'm going to take manufactured examples, but sort of. I mean, they're not manufactured, meaning they're not real life examples. But I'm just going to create them here. If you know what I'm saying there, hopefully, what I'm going to say is, let's take an example. Uh, there is a project. New person joined the team. There is a task that needs to be given to them. I'm going to add more layers of complexity here, Jason. I'm going to make your life difficult, but I'm going to start the
Okay.
question easy enough where the person comes on board, and they have to work collaboratively in a remote setting. Now the onus is a little bit on the company or the organization, on the team, and the individual as well, to get to know anybody better, the team better. You mentioned that if then there could be organization, there could be situations where maybe that they don't facilitate that people get the job done, it's transactional. But I want to say that it could hurt the quality of the deliverable, right? And tell me if you agree or disagree. What I mean by this is, let's say even though it's an engineering deliverable, you're like, Krish, you know what, get this piece of code working or implement this feature, be done with it, and we don't even need to know each other, right? Hypothetically, is it not possible that even though I get that working, if I don't understand where you're coming from and what you need to get done, not just in the context of that singular feature, but perhaps in a slightly broader context? I'm not saying I need to know everything about where this thing fits in, because I say this because I have folks working remotely, sometimes in short-term capacities for us getting stuff done at Snowpal. And when I get the sense that the person is not trying to understand the larger, bigger picture in the context of the engineering problem, that there is a much deeper issue, because you could argue that this React page is working, right? It looks all right. If you have two buttons, you click, it does is it makes a submit, it gets done. But the way the code is constructed, the way the code finds its place into that repository, or whether it should even be in this repo or a different repo, how can I provide all of this feedback before I get the job done if I simply blindly accept orders and say, you know what, I'm going to build this React page, it's going to have these buttons, I click send, it's going to go to a node server or whatever it is? Are you truly getting what you're paying for? Are you kind of getting what you're paying for because the thing works, but it really doesn't work the way you want for it to work in the much longer run?
Yeah, there is. When you, and especially in the world where you're bringing in contractors, of which you were one that worked for me or with me for a while, and that tends to be, I see a lot of other teams treat those as transactions. It's, hey, here's the spec, go build it, and that's it. And more often than not, when you do that type of, or you take that type of an approach, you don't get what you really wanted, because you were trying to distill a vision, a feeling, so to speak, into a requirements document, that was then taken and implemented verbatim. And you don't have that, you don't have the understanding, you're not communicating the understanding with those individuals, because a lot of that is nuance. A lot of it is, oh, I thought that's what I wanted, but really here's what I'm talking about, and it's more of a feeling, it's more of an aspiration. And then your role as the implementer of that is to understand what it is that they truly want, and develop that for them. If you don't build some type of relationship outside of the throwing the requirements over the wall, and and really this could apply even for permanent teams. So it's not even just a contractor. It's not offshoring. It's that mindset of where, and this is where DevOps kind of sprung out of where you had the development team, you had an operations team, the development went off and did everything, and then they just threw it over the wall. And the operations team was going, what the hell is this? What am I supposed to do with this? And so you take that same type of where we combined DevOps, and this is we could maybe for a different conversation. DevOps is not a title; it's a culture. That where we combined the idea of the development teams and the operations teams are living and working together. You have to take that with I guess even the individuals within that, within the team itself. Even if it's just a contractor, you're just hiring out a particular part of a job or for a project. Try to bring them into the team as much as possible. And make sure that they feel like they're part of the team if that's what everybody wants. Again, going back to my previous comment of you shouldn't force people to do things so far outside of their comfort zone. And I've lost my train of thought.
No, what you're saying, that's what you're basically saying is, it's again, one more time, I think the person has to sort of gel well with the team. And I think it's on both sides, because I can speak to it as somebody who's been consulting for a lengthy period of time. And I used to do a full-time job, years ago. I can say that there are organizations where the culture is so much that, hey, you know what, this is a 6-month gig, you get it done, you're out of here, maybe we don't have little time to know each other. Now that could work. It depends on the individual. Like, if it were me, I have to know the team. I have to get some context. It's just the way I roll. I function, right? You hire somebody, you hire them as a package. You can hire them independently for just one of those things and not the other thing as well. But I know folks are good engineers who actually wouldn't care to actually learn more about the team, etc., and so on. It's just their prerogative, their choice. So there's not a single sweet spot, but I think it's important. I just want to tell people, if you're doing it, this becomes even more challenging in a consulting standpoint. If you're a full-time permanent W2ish employee, then I think there is more, you tend to take more effort to making this happen because you're there for the long run. If you're in a consulting engagement, the thought process is, hey, it's a gig, it's 3, 6, 9, 12 months, whatever. How does it matter? I can give an example, even in the context of our conversation here, Jason, as to why it matters. Because when I did the first project, it was a 2-month project, right? When you had actually reached out, it was like, I remember vaguely, it was like a 2-month gig. If we hadn't wanted, if we didn't have, if we didn't have the interest to know anything about each other, because it's a 2-month gig, how do you explain the years we worked together, right? So I'm saying you can't be judgmental, right? The project starts out a certain way. You're not trying to make it a 3-year gig, right? It's just not the way it pans out. It's just like, hey, you like each other. The second time you brought me to help with something else, I have to believe it's for my looks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Right? So, I want to tell people, like, even if you're in a consulting engagement, I've never treated it any differently. This is what I tell people. Whether you're doing consulting, contracting, W2, those are just, tax related terminologies and categorizations, if you will, right? But in the real scenario, you're working with people, solving problems to enrich your life and enrich their lives and the company's lives better. So I think it's very important. Doesn't matter what your role is, you have to pretend like you're in there for the long haul. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to produce the best results. And I've seen that happen time and again, where there is a mindset where, you know what, I'm doing this for 3, 6, whatever. What do I care? No, I think you need to care, because if you do not care, it's going to reflect in the quality of the code that's being produced. Because when somebody looks at the code 6 months after, they don't care that Krish was here for like 3 months or 6 months and wrote those 25 lines of code, and Jason's here for the long haul and has written all the code around it. Somebody reading that is reading that entire file, reading that repository in entirety. So it is actually, I know I'm saying the same thing that you said, Jason, just differently, but do you agree that the type of engagement should not play any role in what you bring to the table?
I agree. I think that first and foremost, you should strive to work for take on engagements or work for a company that suits your personality, or at a minimum that the team that you're going to engage with suits your personality. sometimes like we have to put food on the table, we have to pay bills, and so we will have to do work that we don't necessarily want to. I know that that's shocking news for some of the younger generations these days, but you sometimes you have to do dirty work. I mean, it's not always going to be a panacea. It's not always going to be a utopia environment of where you get to work for 2 hours and then go play ping pong for the rest of the day. Um, so with that in mind, if you have to take a gig and you come to recognize that they're going to treat you as a transaction, you're just a person to get work done. They don't care about you as a person. You have a choice to make, and that I think is what it boils down to: is that life is full of choices. You may not like them, but you still have a choice. And so if that you run into that situation that where I've got a 12-year, or it's not 12-year, I've got a 12-month contract and this team treats me as if I'm nobody, you have a choice to make. Do you want to continue with that engagement because you need to pay the bills and you need to put food on the table, you need to support your family, or is it more important that you find another team immediately that's going to match what your expectations are? And it could mean that you end up taking a lower paying gig. You end up where you're spending 3 months looking for another contract because they're just not available. We're for the economy's in the downturn. But that's a choice you make, and it's really nobody else's fault. It's on you to make that decision. What's important to you? And really, I think what fundamentally, bringing back to what you were talking about, is regardless of what we do, it doesn't matter if we're working with our hands, if we're doing plumbing, if we are building things, if we're working in IT, writing software, doing architecture. I think we have to start thinking of ourselves as craftsmen. What we have to take pride in the work we do, even if we don't 100% agree with the environment that we're working in. If you don't, even if you hate the company you're working for, if you don't take pride in what you're doing, then it makes everything else worse. At least when you walk away from for the day or for the week or walk away from that job, if you can look in the mirror and say, I did 100% my best work that I could, then that helps with everything else that you went through at the time. The environment may not have been perfect. You may have had a couple jerks on the team, but you did your best. And at the end of the day, that's all you have. I mean, is you have to be proud of the work that you do, regardless of where it's done.
I think I spoke to this in a recent podcast where you have to give your 100% because, when someone asks me, can you get this done to my satisfaction? My answer generally has been, Jason, is that I can only promise I can do it to the best of my satisfaction. My hope is that will actually make you happy as well, is the only thing I could say. Because, it's very hard to appease other people. And I'm not sure if we have put on planet Earth to necessarily do that, right? But as long as we do our very best to appease ourselves and do the best we possibly can, and nobody can fault us in what we're not doing. And I think in the last several years, I've seen that I treat software as an art because I think it's an art, and two, it's because I don't have other skills. Like I know I see beautiful guitars hanging at the back that I certainly want to get to. We just don't have time today, but hopefully in the next conversation, I want to talk more about all the other skills I know you have. Like I know you mentioned you finished construction of some of your property. I know you have other skills that some of us don't have that, right? I only know to do one thing, and if I don't treat that as an art, what am I good for, right? So it becomes very important that we actually start respecting what we do, and we start treating that as as though it's more creative than it sometimes might even be, right? Not every page that you write in React, or not every API or endpoint that you write needs to be extraordinarily creative. Some of them are very similar to the previous ones you've did, so they can kind of be borderline boring. But you still have to treat that next endpoint as though it's just as important, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing justice to that endpoint, right? But in terms of culture, like in a remote setting, one more challenge I've seen is, let's say you're working with people who everybody is in Anchorage or in Alaska, or in the suburbs of Anchorage where you live, similar cultures, food habits, and whatnot. There's certain challenges that you may or may not have. But now if you bring somebody who's actually in Washington, D.C., miles away, right? It's still the same country, but still miles away, who was probably born and raised in another part of the world.
Mhm.
And then you're remote, right? You're not working with Krish in a capacity where okay, I'm taking Jason to Indian food, I'm having Alaskan food. You don't have the opportunity to do those types of things. How do you, I mean, that's, I think the future is going to have this. I mean, you can't take that away, right? This is how the world is progressing. What do you have to do as an individual to make bridge those gaps a little bit more?
I- But it's taking the initiative and putting in time and effort to have like when we were working together, there were many times in the morning that it was I had just woken up and we were just I don't know if this is I'll watch my language, but we were just BSing for an hour. And because it was trying to actually take some time and get to know each other, and as best as we could. I wasn't going to be traveling to DC for us to have a meeting. It wasn't probably what we weren't going to bring you up. We didn't have the budget at the time to do those types of things. And so within that context of what, even if it's just an hour a day or in the beginning, I think there's going to be more again when you're going through that forming period of trying to build a team. You have to have that back and forth, and we're not talking about work. We're talking about life. What's your aspirations? Who do you want to be when you grow up? Type of thing. And trying to get to know the person, one, because that helps from a I hate to say this, but from a consulting contracting perspective, it's the can I work with this person longer than what this contract is for. um, and if you can, then at least being able to communicate from a personal perspective, because it feels like that it brings that other individual, especially who is the remote, maybe in a different part of the country, different part of the world, brings that individual closer into the team so that they feel like they belong. I'm, again, I'm not a people person by nature. And so I have to take extra effort for myself from a personality perspective to keep that in mind and to bring people in. And it's doing this for 16 years. And with working with other people who are all over the country, different backgrounds and stuff, it has become easier, almost of a second nature, even though it's still not my go-to from a personality perspective.
Beautiful, right? And I want to say that, as we continue the conversation, I want to get into items of this nature. I know we have only 2 or 3 minutes. I want to wrap this one up, but the next one, hopefully, I can convince you to come back to more of these. I want to talk about, we talked about some of the challenges, right, of doing this remotely, but there's a lot more that I can add to the mix here. Like, for instance, we talked about the length of a project, how long you're getting it done, what in what capacity you're getting it done, right? Whether it's W2 or 1099 or all of those
Mm-hmm.
non-people type of things. And like it or not, like we've touched upon those items, Jason, those bring present their own set of challenges. Uh, as we go along in this conversation, I want to talk about what initiatives can both individuals and organizations, and I'm going to focus on startups because I'm just selfish, just being one. A lot of this is personal learning as well. But I want to talk about, okay, you're hiring somebody who's actually located in Bangalore versus hiring somebody who's located in DC. I know it comes with time zone challenges, other types of things that you have to learn, and not everybody's a people person in the sense that you know everyone, we're good people, but that does not mean you want to know everything about everybody before you get stuff done, because then nothing will
Yeah.
ever get done, because you can spend all the time just learning about the people. So how do we approach a lot of these other things? Because you have, in my one of my recent projects is worked with folks in like South America. That was the very first time I had done, right? I'd never had an opportunity to work with people in like Peru and Colombia, in other places, other parts of South America. It was beautiful. It was nice to learn the culture,
Mm-hmm.
both the non-engineering culture and the engineering cultures. And now I'm better prepared. The next time I work with folks in South America, I know a little bit more. I don't know Spanish or Portuguese, unfortunately, but at least I know a little bit more about the people, and you start appreciating the world in a broader context. I want to say, as we get to the end of this and give you a minute, I've been rambling, so sorry, I'm not giving you time to close this, but I want to say that for folks who are watching this, please don't be judgmental about anything, right? Open your eyes, be broader. Give yourself the chance to work with everybody, anybody located in any part of the world. It doesn't matter. I promise you, you're going to come out with learnings that you expect and learnings that you do not expect as well, right? And it's just left to you to make the best of the opportunities that are presented to you. I know in this context, Jason and I live in the same country, in sort of the same part of the world in that sense. Geographically, I know we are many miles apart, but culturally, lots of similarities, right? But even
Mhm.
if you're not in the US, you're working in different parts and you're working with clients in the US, I want to say that you have to take the time and initiative to learn the cultures a bit more, because even if you're writing Golang, which is what I've been working on now, Jason, we haven't gotten into that. Next time I'll tell you what I've been doing recently. It doesn't matter what languages and stacks you're working on. I think it is important to know the people. I know I've rambled enough. Jason, sorry, your closing comments on this second podcast.
I, I think so. Maybe I'll agree, but with a twist. Um, it fundamentally comes down to what either you as the organization, you as the person that's leading the team or the company, or you as the person that is doing the work. What are your goals in life, and what are your goals with the work that you're doing? Is from There are going to be some people that are. My focus is to get this product out because I think this product is going to change the world. Although the likelihood of that is pretty close to zero, but that seems to be what everybody believes is I'm going to change the world with some new app that everybody will forget about in a year. Um, those types of individuals who think that that's their mission, that's what they're going to focus on. I would highly recommend reading Walter Isaacson's the biography on Elon Musk, because he's that type of person. Elon Musk is his mission is to extend humanity by going to Mars, and everything that he does is a part of that. He's not a wonderful human being. he views people as tools, but that's because he's looking at the broader mission of not making sure that humanity can survive a catastrophic event that happens on Earth. Most of us are not operating at that level. And so we, like you said, is being open to other people, making sure that because it's not just about the product, it's about the work that we do. It's about, can we live with ourselves at the end of the day? And treating people as
Absolutely.
tools for most of us is the wrong approach. And so that finding that balance, if you truly believe you're the next Elon Musk, okay, try to be a little bit more open than he is. But again, the odds of that are 1 in 7 billion or so. That so you're probably not going to be to that level. So don't try to emulate him. I hope I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So I know I want to respect your time. I know you have a hard stop here. So again, thank you so much, Jason, for taking time to chatting. There's a lot more to talk about. I hope my only hope is I did an okay enough job that convinces you to come back to the next ones and so on. So again, thank you very much, Jason.
I appreciate it, and I'll be happy to come back. And if your listeners approve,
Oh, absolutely, they will. Thank you, Jason. Yep.
thank you.